out. I work for Hillside Solutions, and Henrietta lives by the compost drop point downtown.
She wants.
Yeah, she just kind of wanders around.
And I happened to drop some off last night, and I've done it before, and I saw the chicken, and I'm like, there's a chicken. Is the chicken okay? So I tried to contact people like, is the chicken supposed to be here, or does it need to be rescued? So I could see me trying to catch a chicken. Okay, I am starting the recording now, even though we still have a minute here. Thank you, everyone who's joining. Okay, it's 1:30. Welcome to the July program for Green Bellevue. And this month, it's Local Renewable Energy Efforts, Power with a Purpose, and OPPD is going to be presenting their plan to us. To start off the meeting, I'm going to first introduce Jeremy Bowers, who is going to introduce his team at OPPD. So go ahead, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. And as a Green Bellevue board member, this is a kind of a particularly exciting opportunity to get to talk to you all today. And the guests we have here from OPPD, I was just with some family I haven't seen since it's been a while, right? Because as a lot of us haven't been getting together. And I kind of got that feeling when they asked what was going on at work and I had something exciting to talk about, and it's kind of the same feeling today, right? I've been on the board since February and I gotten to know many of you. And so to be able to kind of talk to you about what's going on at work and have our senior leaders come and talk to you about it is really exciting for me personally. So let me kind of go around the room here. I'll start with Mary Fisher. She's my vice president. Mary, you want to introduce yourself?
She's muted.
Maybe if I can unmute. I'm Mary Fisher. As he said, I'm Vice President of Energy Production and Nuclear Decommissioning, and really have a lot of the Power with Purpose folks working with me to bring it forward for OPPD, and we're excited to be with you today. So thank you for having us talk to you today.
Thank you.
And next we have Lisa. Lisa, introduce yourself.
Sure. I know many of you. So Lisa Olson, Vice President of Public Affairs, and Green Bellevue. I mean, Don and all of you have just been great community supporters and leaders. So thank you for that. I'm responsible, of course, for community outreach as well as economic development, legislative, environmental, and SPP and the energy regulatory side of it, and then corporate marketing and communications. So I have a broad blanket in that regard, but I have the opportunity to work with many of you. So thank you for always answering our call. We greatly appreciate it. And thank you for all the great feedback you give us, because you give us information that helps make us better. But as you know, our hearts are always in the right place, but we need to make sure that we keep moving forward. So thank you. And you have a gem with Jeremy on your board. So we chose wisely with that and gave a lot of thought to that. So so no pressure, Jeremy. Just wanted to let you know. So,
Thank you, Lisa. Russ.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Russ Baker. I'm the Director of Environmental and Regulatory Affairs. I report up to Lisa in the Public Affairs Business Unit, but of course I do a tremendous amount of support for Mary and the energy production and nuclear decommissioning folks too. And I'm just happy to be here. We were thrilled to be asked to be able to present this information. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
And lastly, Emily.
Hi, good afternoon, all. My name is Emily Muth. I work for Russ Baker and Lisa in the Environmental Affairs Division. My role currently is the Environmental Sustainability Coordinator. So that's a new position here at OPPD. Excited to be a part of that. And with that, I have the opportunity to work with Jeremy and Mary on some of the decarb projects. So thank you all for having us.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, OPPD team. And I guess before I turn it over to back to Sharon, I guess my role here at OPPD, my current title is Program Manager of Decarbonization. So it's a really exciting time to get to work on that project. It's an exciting time to be at OPPD, and as you've already heard several of us say, it's exciting to be able to be here today to talk to you about it. So with that, Sharon, I guess, or Don, we'll move on.
Great. Okay, next is Don Preister. He's going to start off today's program. I don't think Don really needs any introduction because everybody already knows him. So Don, I'm going to go ahead. Let me get your program pulled up here. Give me just a minute.
And as Sherry is doing that, Dr. Sharon Ray is our Green Bellevue Board President, and she is the Assistant Dean at the Business College at Bellevue University. So we're very pleased to have her leading our efforts, and all of the Green Bellevue board members that are with us today. We're also very pleased to be able to have OPPD and so many of their staff with us. And there I am.
Can you see?
Well, I did, and now I'm...
Yeah, something happened here. It was there and it went away.
That's what had happened on my screen too.
Okay, hang on here. Sorry, everybody.
And we just had a trial run earlier in the day, and it worked finally then, but...
Yes, it did. Hang on. Of course, this is happening. Okay, let me move this over here. Okay, let me start over here. Can you see it now?
Oh, yes, there it is. And I think I have control.
Control.
So, okay, there we go. So this is an image, obviously, of me on a bit of a windy day out there in my backyard. In the back of my yard, which faces toward the south or north and south, it's an ideal place to put solar panels rather than putting them on my roof where when the shingles eventually wear out, I would have to take the panels down, replace the roof, and then put the panels back up. It's just easier. And I had the ideal backyard with no trees, although you can see a tree behind my head there. That's to the north. So it's shadowing a little bit on the panels now, but there's very little, and it's only this part of the year when there's a little bit of shadow. And you can also see there's almost no reflection. Some people think that you get reflection that is like a mirror, but they are intended to absorb light, not reflect off the light. So those are the panels and one image of it. And I'm not getting it to scroll down to the next one.
Yeah, I'll do it.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
This, and I think we'll leave the PowerPoint and the information up. I think it, as Sharon said, it's being recorded. So rather than me go through this, my process has been a period of 20 years at this house. And so I've done a number of things, including putting in a ground source heat pump, making my home energy efficient. OPPD has the blower door program assessment where you have a professional come in and they find all the air leaks to help people to make their homes more energy efficient. So I've done a number of things before I ever got around to actually putting in my solar panels. And I listed a lot of those things. The one at the bottom that remains to be done is at some point putting in some battery storage capacity. But the others are listed there, and we can go to the next slide now. And that's of the front of my house. It's a fairly normal house. I mean, normal except for having a TV antenna up on the roof or a bonsai tree that's a little unusual. And for those who appreciate monarch butterflies, off to the left center, those are the milkweed plants where the monarch butterflies have a way station and can lay their eggs. So other than that, your typical kind of raised ranch house. And from the front, you have no idea that there are solar panels or that there's anything really in the back that looks like the next slide that Sharon will pull up. This slide is back a little farther from the first one you saw, and you can see on the left, there's some darker area in the grass. That's where the trenching was done to bring the electrical line from there and from the panels down into the house. This was right after it was installed, which was in November timeframe of 2016. You can also see before I had the solar panels, my solar powered clothes dryer is right there on the right. And my neighbors to the back, I talked to in advance, and they were all kind of excited and interested in it. So I have not had any issues with anybody in the neighborhood. And the next slide shows the back side. I did get a concern about how am I going to cut grass and what's going to happen under the panels. So I ended up getting some old roofing material from a roofing company, and I put that down, and it's been perfect. And now 3 years later, over 3 years, I don't have any vegetation coming up. I don't keep bumping my head, hitting it as I'm trying to walk under there to do anything. And in the kind of left center, there is the inverter. The electricity is generated from the sun through the panels, collected and sent through this inverter, which converts the solar energy into the electrical energy that I can use in my house. And then it goes down through the tube, down in the ground, and comes around to the back of my house, which I'll show you in just a little bit. You can notice the angle of the solar panels. They're angled at the most appropriate angle, which would be a little more difficult on the roof. But here we could put them at an optimum angle to get the maximum solar radiation. And Sharon, if you would go to the next slide, that depicts the angle, that 90-degree optimum angle. Well, 90-degree would be more like on a roof. This one isn't quite that angle, but in putting in the system, you want to make sure that you've got the right angle. And that's for the solar radiation, which shows up on this next slide, yes. And you can see the Southwest does seem to have the most sunny days, and an average of just under 6 kilowatts that they can generate per hour in those areas. Well, we're not that far off. And when we get to my generation, you'll see that I'm pretty close to that amount. The next slide shows the connection that the Federal Electrical Regulatory Commission, PURPA, requires all utilities to provide for, and that's net metering. And OPPD brought out the meter that you see, and that meter is what reads what comes into my home and also what I generate in excess for electricity that goes back out onto the grid to my neighbors and to other people. To the right of that is the power panel, and in that box on the far right, there's an emergency shutoff. So if there is a need for line workers in the area to be out and they're working on the line, just for certainty, they've got access, they've got my system identified. All they have to do, whether I'm home or not, is hit that switch, and the electricity isn't going to be generated and go back out onto the line. So it would injure any workers. On the far left is the inverter that I showed earlier underneath the panels. It's attached to the racking. It's all aluminum racking. It's pretty lightweight. It is rated to sustain winds of 100 miles an hour. So it's not real heavy, and not a lot of weight, but it is fastened down very securely. And in all the winds that we've had, including, although we didn't have as much of it here, but we did have that tornado in Bellevue, and I had no problems with any movement and anything else with it. The next slide takes it another step and shows a little bit of the process from the generation, this being a roof-mounted solar energy application, where it's generated, and then from, in this case, the roof, it goes to the red box there, which is the inverter that I just showed to you. And then from that, it goes through into the home or the business or wherever it would be utilized. And that goes through the net meter, the meter that OPPD regulates, and they control and they measure and identify each month for me, which will be when we get to it the next slide. And then the excess energy goes back out through the meter, back out into the highline wires, or the grid as it's called. And it helps to add a little electricity for OPPD, although there's a substation here in Bellevue. What I add to it adds a little bit of stabilization out in what's already pretty stable lines. The next slide shows my OPPD bill, and I've highlighted some, whoops, we went one too many. Back up one slide. There, that bill. There's two bills. So this one, if you look in the usage up in the top, kind of the right, it shows the kilowatts, and that's the kilowatt amount that I used for this particular bill, which was August. I'm using electricity for my air conditioning, my cooling, and I had 139 kilowatts that I used for the month, which is very low for most homes. But you notice under that, there's a minus 907. So my solar generation system generated 907 kilowatts for that month, which left a total net of 768 kilowatts that OPPD bought back from me. So I got an offset, and I ended up with a bill of $2.53. I didn't really use any electricity, but we do have a service charge of $30, and there are some other offsetting credits and service fees. But in the end, it was a minimal bill that I ended up with. Just under that, you see there's a summer rate, and OPPD's rate to us as customers is approximately 9.5 cents a kilowatt. And for my net metering credit, they pay me 4 cents. The difference between the two is helping to pay for OPPD's infrastructure, their lines, their service personnel, billing, all of the things it takes to operate a system. In the winter, their service charge is lower, and they charge us as customers approximately 7.5 cents a kilowatt hour. And they, in my case, pay me approximately 3.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So it's a system that's established, and it works pretty well. If you look over under the graph in the bill, you'll see my energy usage shows April, May, June, July, August, September, and October. For those months each year, I generate more electricity than I use. In the wintertime, that's my highest usage because I have no gas, no natural gas for heat. I'm all electric, so everything I run is all from electricity. So for half of the year, I'm generating all of my own. And for the other part of the year, I do use some OPPD electricity. In the end, it balances out. And on the next slide, you'll see that I did have one hiccup in my system, and that's this tall graph of September. For some reason, my inverter went out, and for just about a month until it was covered under warranty, but I found that mine and other systems, the kind of Achilles tendon, the weak point, the Achilles heel, seems to be the inverters. And so it was out, and for that time, I used OPPD's electricity. So I'm on the grid. I'm glad I have OPPD as a backup. And for that month, it was pretty important. On the next slide, it shows my 3-year average of, on the one center column, the actual how much I've generated through the time that it's been in service. I had it installed in late 2016, but until everything was finalized and approved by OPPD wasn't until the beginning of April 2017. So from that time forward, you can see month to month up until the very last box on the right. For average, I've generated 638 kilowatts per month average, but I've only used 390 on average. And so it's sized a little bit larger than I may have needed. I wasn't real sure, and it varies depending on the seasons, but I had planned to get an electric car and to add some other electric things when I first put it in. And on the next slide, you'll see I then did get a used Leaf electric vehicle. And so I'm no longer buying gas to put in a vehicle. And so for almost 3 years, Eric Williams, who is also an OPPD board member and works at Papio Missouri River NRD, had this car. And so when he was getting a new one, OPPD was providing some good rebates, which I thanked them for. And I used one of those rebates to put in a quick charger in my garage. And so now I'm charging my vehicle. And so that is using electricity from my solar panels to power my car as well, helping to move me to not only net zero, but a net positive in my carbon footprint. And why would I do all this? Well, I grabbed a slide from the University of Nebraska Medical Center, and they have the next few slides here because it's good for the environment, it's good for health, it's helping people to reduce some of the impact in our airwaves. And the next slide shows a little bit more of what that is. There in the United States, it's a lot, but 500 million lung cancer deaths each year, and over 1.5 million COPD deaths. So the CO, the CO2, the NOx, the O2, the more we can keep out of the air, the fewer strokes, the fewer cardiovascular deaths, the less impact on our health and our healthcare cost. The next slide is further information on some of the health impacts for having poor air quality. Fortunately, here in Nebraska, we have better air quality than many areas, but health concerns are part of why I chose to do this. And the next slide is showing, again, a little bit more about the concerns with not only somebody who may have a need for insulin because of their blood sugar, but certainly mood is affected, acne, hives, dermatology, sleep apnea, many things, and I don't need to go into a lot of those things. The next slide is a little bit more of that, but the World Health Organization says that 90% of global population is exposed to toxic outdoor air. So I'm concerned about the air, but I want to do my part where I can have control to minimize my contribution. And I do appreciate that OPPD, and we'll hear more about what they're doing, is reducing theirs as well. So at this point, my next slide tells you that I'm about to wrap up here. And on the very next one, I want to thank all of you for being here, for listening, and maybe we can go into OPPDs and then take some questions, or if people want to put questions in the chat, I can try and answer them too. But at this point, I'll turn it back to you, Sherry, and to Jeremy for the OPPD part of the presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Don. I'm sure people are going to have questions after this. I've seen this at Don's house, and it's pretty amazing what he's done.
And I can answer questions later, or if they email them to us through Green Bellevue, or they can call me as well. So we do an annual open house, but this year, unfortunately, with COVID, the open house is going to be virtual, so we won't be doing it the same way.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Jeremy and Russ, and you really should have control. So let's see.
Excellent. Russ should be pulling up the slide deck now. So I guess with that, I'll just a few comments. Again, we appreciate being here, and I appreciate the OPPD team being here, kind of having a hand at Green Bellevue, being on that board, and then obviously being at OPPD. Again, really excited to be here. And this is a cool way to do this. You know, obviously we'd rather do it in person, but being able to follow Don, and you kind of hear the passion in his voice about this issue and about the work that he's done at his home. And I expect that you'll hear that same passion, right, as we talk to you about what's happening at OPPD, because we're really excited about it. So, you know, we started with Don at his home, and then we're moving out, you know, into utility space, and we're talking about community solar. We're going to talk about utility scale solar and what we're doing with Power with Purpose, and then ultimately our initiative around decarbonization. So without stealing Lisa's thunder, she's going to get us started. Russ, are we ready to go? Okay, I'm reading your lips, and I think you said it looks like we're ready to go. So
It looks like we're ready to go. Is everybody seeing the presentation that I have up there right now? Hopefully,
yes, sir.
Jeremy, very good. So
Russ, can you put it in slideshow?
Yep, I will. What I was going to do is I was just going to say thank you, Senator Preister, for that presentation that you just did. Things have changed since 2016 at OPPD, and believe it or not, we have a much fuller, richer information source on OPPD.com for customer-owned generation. And so I'm going to put in the chat window the site that contains the solar calculator, the net metering information, some frequently asked questions, just a lot of things I think that really complement your presentation, Senator Preister, and so just wanted to make sure that was all that was out there as well. So thank you so much, Green Bellevue, for inviting us to this event. I also want to shout out, I know before we got started, I noticed a couple of OPPD employees also that were on. So in addition to the team that comes to you today, we also have Lori Zagurski that's online. I already mentioned Lillian Dawes, who's one of the members of Green Bellevue. Landy Jacobson, I saw your name out there, so a big shout out to you as one of our retirees that I just loved to work with before. And I'd be remiss if I didn't recognize Director Williams as well, who's online right now too. So thank you for the big support by OPPD. I'm going to put it in presentation mode. and get us set up this way. So today we're going to talk about our decarbonization strategy, the Power with Purpose, a little update on our Power with Purpose project. We've also brought some information together on our community solar project to give everybody kind of an update of where we are with our community solar. And so as you can see here, a nice full agenda that we're going to cover, and I'll also talk a little bit about how far we've come. You know, as I mentioned this new information that's out on OPPD.com. We'd also like to take you back maybe 10 years and kind of show you some of the things that OPPD's been doing over time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Vice President Lisa Olson, who's going to set that stage and give you a little bit of the background, where we've come from, where we are as we move forward. So Lisa, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Russ. Greatly appreciate it. And you all know that Russ has been a great advocate, both for our community as well as OPPD. So he's a very much a trusted partner in all of this. So think the world of him as well. So like Russ said, we really want to talk about how far we've come. And I think sometimes we're remiss on telling that journey. We're a very humble organization, and we like to stay behind the scenes in that regard. But if you could go to the next slide, I'm just going to take us a step back further. You know, for many of you, and you know, Senator Preister definitely knows this, that Nebraska is an all public power state. And that's been that way since 1946, and it's local control. You know, we make sure that our board of directors, they're the ones that set the rates for us to ensure that they're affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive. And you'll talk through that. So as we talk to some of our friends in some of our national organizations, as I always say, you're very fortunate because with public power, you're at the table to talk through all of this. Whereas if it was an investor-owned utility, you probably wouldn't be talking to vice presidents and CEOs and board members and so forth. So we're very fortunate, and also it's important that we keep that model, especially down in Lincoln and so forth, because I know that there's been, the last few years, there's been a couple senators that have questioned the public power model. And as I always say, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, right? Once it's out, you can't get it back. So we have a very, very special situation here. So we need to make sure that we keep it. And Senator Preister and many of you have come to our defense in that regard. So keep up the great work there. So with that, we have really three areas. We have our mission statement: affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive. And we take that very serious and to heart. But then we also have our strategic directives that our board of directors are actively involved in. There's 15 of them, and Director Williams knows this. It's very hard to balance all of those. And we have monitoring reports that we report out to the board members each year. And then we also look at those strategic directives to make changes. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a couple slides on SD7, our environmental stewardship. And then last but not least, we have legal and regulatory obligations. The state of Nebraska state statutes. We have an obligation to serve every individual in the state, no matter if they're in rural or urban. And so we take that very serious as well. And then we have the Southwest Power Pool, and that is all the way up to the Canada, all the way down to Texas, that we're part of that organization, so that we can balance the flow of the electricity and so forth. And then last but not least, of course, the federal government in our FERC and NERC requirements. So those are our guiding principles, and they're a full agenda. So next slide, please, Russ. So let's start that journey. And I'm proud that on the left-hand side, you know, we started way back in 2010, and our goal was really to have 10% renewable energy. And so we're proud to say we're already at 40% right now, and going to be, with Power with Purpose, we'll be taking that even further. So with all of your help, we've done this really at the pace that was good for our customers along that path. So next slide, or next click, please. So a lot happened during 2010 all the way up to 14, 15, 16, and 17, and then a boatload in 19. So we'll talk through that. But and on the left-hand side, starting with that, you can see all of the wind projects. We also chose that we wanted our wind all in Nebraska. that was really important to us to keeping the economy going and so forth. So that was, so there is no wind that is outside the state of Nebraska. And then Mary will talk about our solar as well as natural gas. We'd really like to keep that within our service territory, which OPPD is in 13 counties, all the way down to the Kansas border, all the way up to Washington and Burke County to the north. So a little bit more on that. I'm just going to do some highlights. 2016 in April, our board of directors, and many of you helped with that decision as well, that we announced that we would retire North Omaha Station 1, 2, and 3 later on, and we'll talk through how we made that commitment and have honored that as well. And then I would say in 2016, the announcement of Fort Calhoun decommissioning, I was on the senior team at the time, and Mary has done a beautiful job really leading Fort Calhoun and the decommissioning and so forth, but making that decision. And I've done this for a lot of years, not in nuclear, but you know, that was 600 people's lives that we were impacting. And so as the smallest utility or nuclear plant in the United States, we just couldn't sustain it. And so the mind said one thing and the heart said another. But I will tell you, we have treated the people with dignity and respect. We have tooled some of their talents and so forth and have utilized them in other parts of the organization. If they wanted to stay in nuclear, we were able to help them with that transition as well. And if they wanted to retire, we were able to help with that transition. So we're really pleased that while it was an unfortunate decision, but it was the right decision for the ratepayers as well. So, and then during that time in November of 16, we announced no general rate increase for 5 years in that regard. And so we're just going to be doing our budgeting tomorrow, spending 8 till 5 o'clock tomorrow to ensure that we continue that no general rate increase in 2021. So next slide, please, Russ. So then our board, another reason we're here is to talk about Power with Purpose, and made the announcement after, and Mary will talk through this. I mean, hundreds of thousands, millions of modeling that took place in this regard. And we had a real challenge with this, and we'll talk a little bit more about this on the next slide, that we're very fortunate because we have growing load in our service territory, and especially in Sarpy County. Sarpy County has done a beautiful job, absolutely beautiful job, growing the economy and so forth in the area and so forth, and especially along the Highway 50 corridor and so forth. And so just so that you know, to put that in perspective, the load that's coming on in that particular area is the size of Lincoln. That is bringing on enough electricity basically to serve the entire city of Lincoln. So that is major, and we'll talk through that a little bit more. So let's head into 2019. 19 and 20, like I said, we were on our way to, well, first of all, at the end of December, we were proud because the community solar project, and with the help of some of our stakeholders, it was a long journey, but we made sure that we had to talk through community solar because, as many of you know, the definition of community solar is different for a lot of different people. So we made sure that that messaging was right and so forth. And with that, we were able to sell out that community solar really in 49 days. And so then that particular community solar in Fort Calhoun went operational in January. Had a little bit of delay. The flood had a little bit something to do with that. So as we're looking for new locations, floodplains is not one of those that we're going to, even though you can build the panels high enough, it's just one of those that we're definitely trying to stay away from in that regard. So then we were heading out on Power with Purpose. We had announced that we were going to head out through all the counties along our service territory and talking through our solar and outreach and so forth, and then the COVID hit. And then we had to rethink through that. So we had our State of the Utility, and this was, if you go to OPPD Listens, it's basically 10 highlights of what was going on in your utility. And so we did do that virtual online, and we were able to put in that in that effort that you could talk through those 10 items and how your satisfaction. And there were a lot of people from Sarpy County that did comment on that. So thank you for that. So with that, we kept thinking, okay, we got to rethink this and our outreach with the communities and so forth. And then we were proud that in June, we launched OPPD Community Connect. And I'll talk a little bit about that at the end. And it's a virtual platform that will be the first utility in the United States to utilize it. It started out of Australia. And with that, we'll also put that link. So it went live July 1st. So it will be able to show all these projects, and especially with Power with Purpose. Like I said, no decisions have been made yet in that regard. So you'll be able to watch that journey along to see the conversations. So next slide, please. So I'm not going to go one-on-one, but as you can see, Russ, could you go back? On the right-hand side, you know, carbon emission and climate change. We're taking this very seriously, and we'll talk through our decarbonization effort, and we're really excited about that. But our strategic initiatives are heavy lifting and really touch all of these components because we want to get in front of it so that we can be good stewards of your utility going forward. So next slide, please. So one of the big items was SD7, environmental stewardship, and I know Director Williams was actively involved with that. And so while we had a lot of outreach in this regard and a lot of people that added comments through OPPD listens and so forth, but on that second bullet, second bullet, the key to all of it, I'm gonna cut to the chase, is that we're going to strive for the goal of net zero carbon production by 2050. And with that also, we're working on a vision really for OPPD for 2050. And not a lot of people are looking out that far, but it's going to be really important that we take a look at that. And having net zero carbon is going to be a key component of that as well. And that's not just about the utility, and we'll talk through that a little bit more of how can we interact with the communities and basically talk through how our customers can have goals and so forth, and the community from a transportation standpoint. How can we interject and have community conversations? And that OPPD community connection is going to be part of that as well. So next slide, please. Okay, so this is going to tee up really our Power with Purpose, and then Mary's going to go through that component of it. And then, like I said, you have an expert here with Jeremy Bowers, and you'll see that Russ Baker is one of the champions on that as well from a community standpoint. But we had a challenge. We had a changing generation landscape all along the Missouri River, as well as all through SPP, that coal plants are being retired, including ours. In that regard. So like I said, units 1, 2, and 3 have been retired. And then by 2023, that 4 and 5 at North Omaha will be retired off of coal and then brought on, continue with natural gas in that regard. So we also have to support the needs of our growing communities because we have an obligation to serve. And of course, maintaining reliability and resiliency. And I would say Bellevue has been front and center on that as well with the flooding. And we kept the power going, and thank goodness for our peaking stations, our gas peaking stations, because they really saved us in that regard. They were able to help through when some of the areas were really hard hit in that regard. And then of course, when the tornadoes came through, we had major 345 lines that were down for several months and so forth. So we had to reroute and so forth. And then our framework, we talked through that we had to balance our mission, the strategic directives, and then our obligation to serve. And then the solutions, of course, after the modeling that had to be done is that we're going to do large utility scale solar, 400 to 600 megawatts, and then natural gas backup, and Mary will talk about that's going to run maybe 10% of the time. That's just as backup in that regard. And then modernize the natural gas replacement. And as you can see with North Omaha of that's going to reduce carbon CO2 emissions by 80 to 90%. And then voltage support, and Mary will talk a lot about that. And then we're in the middle of our request for proposals on solar as well as our natural gas. So next slide, please. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Mary Fisher, who's going to walk you through the next steps, and then we'll finish up with some stakeholder, quickly on stakeholder, and then open it up to Q&A session for you. So thank you, Miss Mary.
Thank you, Lisa. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our Port Calhoun solar, and the senator set this up very nicely. So next slide, please. Community solar began on April 1st, 2019. It sold out in 49 days, which was very, very good. We had no expectation it would sell out that quickly. 891 subscribers and 8,400 shares that were sold. We have about 450 customers on the wait list, and we continue to look at options for us to bring on more community solar programs. But we're really focused right now on our utility grade solar, so we'll have to try to balance those two in the future. Next slide, please. I don't know that I want to go into this. I think that the senator did a great job of showing you how solar works. You go from a solar panel to an inverter, which inverts from DC power to AC power, goes out on the transmission, or in your case, Senator, the distribution grid, and then can come into your home. So when you buy into part of our community solar projects, this is the way that it would work. Our community solar project is a 5 megawatt facility, and it is capable of providing enough electric generation to approximately 1,300 homes. Next slide. So the solar array, you saw that, but just to give you some statistics of how that might look, we use rotating panels. So they articulate and follow the sun. They're about 18 to 24 inches off the ground at their lowest point and about 10 feet tall. Next slide. Our Fort Calhoun Community Project is a purchase power arrangement with NextEra Energy Resources, and they are really the ones that brought this into the community for us. They own and operate generating facilities in the United States and Canada, and they're the world's largest generator of renewable energy in wind and sun. So they really brought a lot of experience in when we went to build this community solar. And more than 97% of our electricity comes from clean or renewable resources from in the NextEra generation grid. Next, please. So what's the life cycle of a solar facility? Well, we install the arrays. They have a 20 to 25 years. Some maybe have a 30-year life. There's no waste, there's no operational waste, there's no water discharge, and there's no air emissions. So that makes it a great facility for us to be looking at. Decommissioning plans are required as part of our purchase power arrangements. Panels are to be recycled, and then the site is restored. So this is the way that we look at the life cycle of a solar facility. Next slide. This just shows you can go out on our internet page and you can see this community solar. So if you're part of that, maybe you've already been out there, but you can see the solar in the left-hand, top left-hand quadrant comes on during the day, goes off at night. And you can see kind of over on the far right, on a cloudy day when it's raining, we don't get a whole lot of solar generation. You can also see how many megawatts it's producing at any point in time. And then down below, we try to keep track of how much carbon we're saving, what that means for trees, light bulbs, and oil. So this is just a snapshot of July 9th that shows you it was a rainy day and we weren't producing a whole lot of electricity with solar at that time. Next slide. So why do we need the gas? Well, that slide just showed you. In the evening when we have no solar, maybe we have wind, but the wind doesn't always blow and the sun doesn't always shine. And that's where natural gas comes in. It is really that backup. It is to provide us that quick response and reliability and resiliency for when a cloud comes over and all of a sudden we have a rainstorm and the solar is gone. We need quick ramping gas generation in order to compensate for the solar events that we would see, or the solar that would be intermittent on our grid. As you can see, the pictures in the middle here show you some of the events that we've had where our resiliency of our system has really been tested. The one down below was a tornado that came through in 2017 and took out 7 transmission lines. One up above is an ice storm that we had early in the fall, and really took us by surprise. The trees still had some leaves on them, and we had some pretty significant damage. And then, as most of you will recall, the flooding that we had last year was really significant. And this is a picture of our transmission line sitting in the middle of the river. So the river banks moved quite substantially. All of these tell us that we need to have the resiliency in our system, and that's really part of the solution that we put together for the Power with Purpose project. It really allows us to refuel our coal with natural gas assets and to shut down our coal generation at the North Omaha station while meeting that oncoming load that Lisa talked about. Next slide, please. So again, why natural gas? Part of what Lisa talked about was we had regulatory obligations through the Southwest Power Pool. Part of that is to meet our accredited capacity. And that term gives people some issue, and so I'll try to define it as best I can. On a hot summer day like we're having this week and probably next week, we reach our peak capacity pretty quickly. All the homes have their air conditioners on. Those buildings that are being utilized typically last summer, and maybe not this summer with the COVID virus, but would give us a peak. And during the day that we have to meet not only that peak, but plus 12%. So that's a requirement of our SPP. So we have to meet that accredited capacity requirement. We do that with a cost-effective solution, and that cost-effective solution, as we modeled it, was to really bring on more renewable generation in the form of solar, and then to complement that with up to 600 megawatts of natural gas. Natural gas is a cleaner energy fuel source, and so it's really helping us to decarbonize. And really, I like to think of this as the precursor to our decarbonization. Next slide, please. I get a lot of questions about how do we site generation and what sorts of considerations do we look into. And this is just a snapshot of some of the things that we take into account. I will say right now, as we're moving through our Power with Purpose project, we've not made any final determinations about where our solar nor our gas assets will be located, but these are some of the things we're considering. So businesses, agriculture, schools, we go down into the environmental side, we look at conservation areas, we look at floodplains, wooded areas, wetlands and waterways, threatened and endangered species. And then on the engineering side, we need to look at, where are the roadways, what is the cost? Structurally, will the ground support the generation that we want to put in? Do we have water? What are the wells like? And then just the site topography. So it's important to us that we take all of these things into consideration. So it's a difficult, complex decision, and it's taking us some time to make sure that we make the overall correct decision for OPPD and its customers and the community going forward. Next slide, please. In terms of solar RFP responses and potential natural gas locations, we like to show this slide because it really gives you the breadth of responses that we got. We did require that all solar RFP responses be in the state of Nebraska. We want to make sure that we ensure that we're bringing that into the state. And as you can see, we have a preference, or we put a preference in there, that it be located within our service territory, so more on the eastern side of Nebraska, as you see from Burke County down to Gage and Nemaha County. We got pretty good response for solar developers, but as we have an ongoing growing load, it is really more important for us to get the solar and the natural gas closer in to the load that is growing so that we can provide that resiliency and reliability. So as you can see, the green here shows the solar responses. This sort of pink color or salmon color shows where we are looking at both solar as well as gas solutions. And then in Douglas County, we're really looking at a gas solution. So this is kind of where we're focusing, taking all of those things that I talked about earlier into account, looking at the different RFP responses that we received. Next slide, please.
Hey, Mary, and I just want to add, this is Lisa, just that it won't be in one location. So solar won't be in one location, or gas won't be in one location. It will be along the service territory. So.
Yeah, that's great, Lisa. Thank you. Yeah, we will have multiple sites for solar. It won't be in just in one location. Thank you. Next slide, please. So as we go through this Power with Purpose solution, it's really to meet that growing load that we have. It's also to ensure the reliability and resiliency of the system and to meet that accredited capacity for that load that's coming on. But decarbonization is a long-term view, and it's really looking at how do we strategically plan for the future to become net zero carbon, which was in our board resolution in November of 2019 through Strategic Directive SD9, which Lisa went over earlier. Next slide, please. So we're working on a Pathways to Decarbonization study. And in support of that, we're looking at not just our power generation, but our operations, what products and services we can provide to our customers, such as the Connect that you saw earlier on the Senator's slides, and then how we can be a community partner, doing things like we are today, sitting with the community and hearing what your thoughts and ideas are, and how we can take a leadership role. Next, please. So the net zero carbon objectives are really to put actionable pathways for the future in place. And we're doing that by developing a roadmap for decarbonization. It'll be a long-term roadmap, but it'll take into account our business practices as well as the customer demand for decarbonization products and how we can serve that, and then how we can be that industry leader and trusted partner both in the community and in other industries as well. Next, please. So I want to go into a little more detail to kind of give you what we're really looking at. Jeremy Bowers is the lead, overall program lead for this. He has 4 project managers reporting to him. And so I'm going to go through and give you a detail as to what we're doing in each one of these areas. In the energy portfolio area, this is really about our generation fleet. What can we do over the long term to reduce our gas emissions, our greenhouse gas emissions, and really serve our customers' energy requirements? So as we look at this, we really think that we have 4 things that we need to manage. We need to reduce our emissions. So those reductions are increasing. We need to maintain the resiliency where we are today. We have adequate resiliency. We've shown that over the last few years with the tornadoes and the floods and the ice storms. And so we just need to make sure that we can maintain that on our grid. We need to do it over time, and we need to manage our costs. We want to make it affordable for our customers. And so we're paying attention to all of those. On each one of these slides, as I go through these different components, you'll see a milestone and deliverable slide, box up in the upper right-hand corner, and a resource summary down in the left-hand corner. These are really telling you what our timeline is and how much of a resource we're putting forward on the energy portfolio. As you can see down on the bottom left, we have 37 people involved in this today, and we're anticipating over 23,000 hours that will be spent over the next year and a half in order to complete this study. And the study is due to be complete 4th quarter of 2021. Next, please. Our internal operations, Jessica Delatorre is leading that for us. Jessica is doing a really fine job looking into the Greenhouse Protocol corporate accounting and reporting standard. And what we're trying to do is benchmark ourselves against our peers in the industry to really understand how they are decarbonizing their business and what we can do to make sure that we're reporting it accordingly and making sure that we're staying in tune with what the rest of the industry is doing. And really what this is really how do we decarbonize our footprint in areas other than generation? So our buildings, our fleet. So we're looking at that overall in all areas of our business. She has about 21 people involved and is expecting to spend 6.3 thousand hours between now and the end of the year. Jessica, by the end of the year, will have put together a baseline for us. That's really what this year is about. And then next year, we'll start looking at ways that we can change our business practices and make them more sustainable for the future. Next, please. Our customers. So you're our customers, all of our customers. Really what we want to be is that trusted energy advisor. And we want to create products and services that you need or you want that will help you to recognize your carbon footprint, should you so desire. The senator is a great example of that. We want to be that partner to help you do what he's been able to do. The milestones here is to have a decarb product portfolio complete by the first quarter of 2021. And he has 7 people that are involved right now, and just about 5,000 person hours associated with this over the next year. Next, please. And then Russ Baker, who is on the line today. Russ is really leading this community event, and we've asked him to do this widely in the community so that we can plan an active active role in educating and setting policy and strategic direction with those community organizations such as yourself that ask us to help in that. So we're planning to support product development on strategies and that will large impact to the community organizations. Russ has a goal to plan for pilot communities by the fourth quarter of 2021, and we'll spend about 5,000 hours with about 6 different people involved. Next slide. And then our program milestone. This is what Jeremy is doing. He's trying to coordinate all 4 of these to ensure that we meet this milestone. Really make sure that these are integrated, and if we learn something in the energy portfolio modeling that we're doing that could be applicable to our customers, then we want to make sure that we get those integrated thoughts and ideas to come together. With that, I'll just pause a minute. Jeremy, do you have anything you'd like to add here?
No, thanks, Mary. Not particularly. You're doing a great job of teeing it up. I always like to emphasize the value of this internal the internal operations piece, because it really informs our leadership position and informs a culture change internally. Not that we're not focused on that issue internally, but we're taking a real formal effort from a program standpoint to build it throughout our business processes, that this is an important issue for OPPD. And so why it doesn't seem as outward facing, it's really important to us because it tells us, it kind of tells us who we are, right? And it tells us that this is really important. And it's going to be important with us now through 2050, right? Through our end state. So thanks, Mary.
Next slide, please, Russ. So at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Lisa to really talk with you about our stakeholder engagement program. Lisa?
Great, thank you so much, Mary and Jeremy. Next slide, please, Russ. Well, we are very fortunate because we have Lori Zagurski on the line as well, and I know many of you know Lori. She was really instrumental in finding this new tool that we're going to be using. Like I said, it's going to be the first time any utility has used it. It's OPPD Community Connect, and Lori, if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat so that they have a link for that. It is live, and it will continue to grow in terms of, as you can tell on the right-hand side there, that we'll have a timeline on pathways to decarbonization, power with purpose, and so forth. And it's going to be a live chat so that people can talk with each other and so forth. And I will say we're going to use this for more than just utility business. Diversity and inclusion is very important to us at OPPD, and we also know in light of everything that's going on in the community as well how important that is. So if we need to have conversations about that, we'll be able to use that tool as well. So we're really excited. There'll be interactive project pages, quick polls, timelines, Q&As, and so forth. So more to come. Thank you, Lori, for posting that. And thank you for doing, she and her team have been doing yeoman service trying to get this up and running in time. And I think she probably has a little gray hair, but thank goodness she can color it as well. Right, Lori, with that. So next slide. And then, like I said, the platform is just so dynamic, and it's going to talk through, you know, the level of engagement is important. And we do the International Association of Public Participation. It's called OPP2, and it's a well-known model. So then you'll know where you can engage during that time in terms of inform and consult and so forth, and utilize this platform along the way. So more to come. We're going to be using this for lots of different projects because, like I said, we have the pathways to decarbonization. We have power with purpose. We have some heavy lifting going on, and so a lot of irons in the fire, literally. So, but we're excited about it. So with that, we just wanted to open it up. Next slide, please. Questions, comments, and like I said, we're all real open to conversations of what's going on in your communities and so forth. We have had lots of conversations along the 13 counties as well, and especially with Power with Purpose. And we're going to continue to have those conversations because no decisions have been made in that regard. So we're very fortunate that we have a growing load, that the economy is doing well in light of even with COVID and so forth. So everybody needs to use electricity, right?
Hey, Lisa, I saw a question in the chat about the pollinators. Maybe we could have Emily talk about that for a minute.
Absolutely great. And I just want to tee that up as well. Emily was the one that brought that to the district as well. And really our employees, along with Save the Monarch Foundation, went out and she'll talk a lot about that, of how many pollinator habitats that we've already installed. So Miss Emily.
Well, thank you. I'm always excited to talk about this project. So the Pollinator Habitat Project came about 3 years ago when we were looking at ways to be better stewards of some of our landscapes. As you well know, we've got substations and properties all across our service territory in the 13 counties. And we spend a lot of time and effort mowing those. And is that really the best use of our resources? And at that same time, we had the Save Our Monarch Foundation approach us. And so we worked in partnership to educate and inform stakeholders, as well as to develop a practice to help to install pollinator habitat at various locations. We have about 300 acres right now. Most of those are at generating facilities or a few substations. We've also done some work at the Arboretum, which has been a lot of fun. That was the event that Lisa's talking about with employees. So it was great to see linemen coming out in force. You know, they've got their tool belts and they're finding great ways to put all these pollinator plugs in around. So that was a lot of fun. But happy to answer any questions on that project if anybody has it. I did respond to the one in the chat that we are including that as part of the solar bid process. And so that is another characteristic that we evaluate for.
So that's the conclusion of our formal presentation. But like I said, and this conversation does not have to end here, because we will come back as often as you would like to talk through, because there's a lot going on, and as well as in your particular neck of the woods, as well as the other 13 counties as well. So I think we'll hand it back to you guys to facilitate whatever you'd like to do next.
Great. Thank you very much, everybody. And just a reminder, this is recorded and we'll have it up on our website in the next week or so. Don, do you have anything else to add for Green Bellevue notices?
Yes, thank you, Sharon. Thank you, everybody. I particularly was impressed with the enthusiasm from OPPD's presentation. It certainly was there, and I thank all of you for putting the time in on your regular job and then bringing it on the weekend here today to present to the community. I counted at one time we had 40 people that are all watching and tuned in, and that's just those that are able to make it now. There will be more as it's recorded that are able to benefit from it later. One of the questions that was on there was, what did my system cost and do I expect it to pay? I did put some information on the chat, but my system cost $21,000, and in the 3 years it's been up and operating, it has paid half of that in the first 3 years. Now, it pays a little more in the first half because you get a 30% tax credit. That's going down this year to 25%, and then I think it's 25%, and then it continues to phase out. So the second half will take a little bit longer, but I expect it to be paid off in 10 years, and the panels are guaranteed to be at 85% of their new capacity up to 25 years. So after it's paid in 10 years, I have 15 years when it's still continuing to generate. So for me, it's a good investment. I sleep good at night with it. And continuing this program and our Green Bellevue presentations, we have monthly programs on the second Sunday of each month. So I would like to mention that on August 9th, our next program, we will have a Zoom screening of the movie, The Burden. And The Burden talks about the military and the burden that gasoline and fossil fuels have put on our military and the importance of being energy self-sufficient for our military. It's quite an incredible movie, and it's all pretty much by military people. So you might want to think about coming to that. All of these are posted on our Green Bellevue website, and anybody that wants to get on our email list can certainly sign up there and do that. September 13th, we're going to have some students give reports on some of their green projects and what they've been doing here locally. Then in October, we'll have our annual board meeting, and I'll leave it at that for now. And I think other than thanking I do want to give some credit too, to two people that are, I think, may even still be on here, but Brittany Devastani and Leon Komar both helped me with my slide presentation. My electronic development of PowerPoints leaves a little to be desired, but thanks to them for helping me put it together. And if there are any other questions for OPPD staff or for me on the presentation, we can take those if anybody wants to chat, or just put your mic on and ask.
I had a question in the chat about, for big businesses, we had several come into the area near Highway 50 and 370. Does OPPD offer incentives for them to build solar as they were coming in to our area in Sarpy County?
I can take that. We did not offer incentives, but I will tell you, as you know, OPPD has been very instrumental with talking with our customers as well. And so we do have conversations nonstop about renewables and so forth. Now, our renewable rate, thanks to our board of directors, and that is our 261M rate. I know it's not a sexy name, but it does the job that they can get renewable energy to serve their particular facilities and so forth. So that was very instrumental. So not per se in incentives per se, but it was a rate that was very beneficial to their purposes as well as wanting renewable energy in their portfolio.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you very much.
And I see another question for me too. The question is, what did I do since I disconnected from MUD natural gas for my heating system? I did install a ground source heat pump. So I am a very energy efficient heater and cooler. I no longer have an outside air conditioning unit. My cool air comes up from 55 degrees down 200 degrees or 200 feet in the ground. And so my air conditioning right now, when everybody has high bills for air conditioning, my bills are almost nothing. My energy usage is very low. The winter, I do use more electricity to generate the heat, but again, it's from a ground source heat pump, so it's very efficient.
I see another question. Someone online, actually she's one of our board members, tried to register the OPPD Community Connect link and it didn't recognize the zip code 68005 for Bellevue. Just want to make sure somebody from OPPD saw that note.
Yep, Lori Zagorski did. Lori, and she's checking into it. Anything you'd like to add, Lori?
Okay, I see it there.
No, we'll definitely check into it. Thank you. And then it looks like Lillian replied that she was able to log on with that zip code. So it did recognize Bellevue. So we will still take a look into that if there's a hiccup there. So thank you for bringing that to our attention.
Okay. Okay.
I would just add the question about who installed my ground source heat pump that unfortunately I had 3 different installers. One was the well driller. They have to drill the well, and the people who did that are no longer in business. Fortunately, the wells are working and I don't have a problem. I also needed an installer and I also needed an electrician. The installer is no longer in business either. So unfortunately, there are others though, and new people who are doing the businesses, but you do need to get different businesses, and you can go through somebody who can coordinate all 3. But when you put in a ground source heat pump, there's the well driller, the electrician, and the unit installer itself. So you have 3 different people to work with. Sharon, I think you.
Don, you muted yourself. Hang on.
Oh, I just, thank you for the reminder. I was just complimenting, saying you did a great job putting this together. We appreciate you. I appreciate all the people who tuned in. And I send my thanks to OPPD for ongoing good customer service, their responsiveness, and always keeping the lights on, even for me who has solar.
Okay, if there's no more questions,
Thank you.
I'll stop the
Thank you all.
recording and we'll post this out. Thank you very much.
Have a good afternoon.